2. Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST. We are Baltimore Positive. We are at State Fair. We're in Catonsville. I ate earlier. We've been here so long, I'm ready to eat again. Don Moeller is here. Senator Ben Cardin joins us now. And so we do topicality here, and we're literally on about day 3 or 4 of impeachment right now. People will see this months from now. That was not what this was designed to do. But I think we do need to talk about the difference between you serving citizens in a 3rd district, serving citizens in Annapolis, and then going to what I heard you call Washington, the way we should call it that, during the break. That you go there, and you're serving people in a different way now, and your role, and I know you have some sensitivity to this because you're going to be in front of the world telling everybody what you know about all of this. But the notion that there are certain freedoms and things that you're there to make sure whomever our president is, he's not in other lands taking money from foreign governments and calling out favors and holding back millions of dollars from the Ukraine.
Well, and let me back up here because I think this is an extremely important subject, and I think it has not really been covered the way it should. The Congress has a very important check and balance of powers in our Constitution. We're an independent branch of government. We have a responsibility, regardless of what party controls the White House and what party controls the Congress, to act as an independent branch of government, as a check and balance on the power of the executive branch of government. We are also the legislative branch of government, so it's up to us to determine policies for the country, not the President of the United States. And both of those responsibilities of the Congress have been really tested to a limit under President Trump. He really does believe that he is also the legislative branch of government. We see that through his executive orders. We see that with his desire to build a wall in which Congress specifically after he requested it, specifically rejected it and said, no, there's a better way for border security. It's technology. It's investing in people in order to keep us safe in intelligence. And we'll put the money there rather than building a medieval-type wall. Despite the fact that we specifically took up his recommendation, despite the fact that we specifically acted differently, and the president signed off on it because he had to sign the appropriation bill, after that he used his emergency powers to say, no, we're not going to do what Congress told me to do. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to build this wall anyway. And I'll use emergency powers, even though he acknowledges there's really no emergency from a time point of view of doing the wall the way he says it.
I'm just glad the snakes didn't show up, Senator.
Yeah. This is an abuse of power, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican who's president, regardless who controls it. We got letters from Republican former members of Congress that said, please stop the president from doing this because the tables will turn. There's going to be a Democratic president who will do things that Republicans don't like. The legislature is the legislature. So it's that type of abuse of power where Congress really needs to step in. It's not a policy issue. We're not arguing the policy. We're arguing the power. Who has the power to make those decisions? So in regards to what happened in Ukraine, there's a challenge as to whether the president was using the power of his office for a partisan political basis, compromising national security on foreign policy. That's the conversation that took place between the president of Ukraine and the president of the United States, which is the centerpiece of the current impeachment inquiry in the House of Representatives. It's a serious issue. The second issue is whether there was a cover-up, whether this information was put in a place that would not normally be reserved for this type of information. Was that an effort to cover up the use of his political office rather than doing what was right for our country? The House of Representatives has only one way they can operate here. There's only one way to hold the president accountable. The Mueller investigation made it very clear that it's up to Congress, not the normal investigative criminal proceedings, to hold a president responsible while he's a sitting president of the United States. So the only method, only constitutional method to hold the president accountable is through impeachment inquiry. That's what the House of Representatives has started. And again, when this is aired, maybe that'll be a different status, but that's where we are right now. They'll make their judgment, the members of the House, whether this rises to a high crime and misdemeanor in office subject to articles of impeachment or not. When that decision is made, it's final. There's no appeal from the indictment stage at the House of Representatives. If they dismiss it, the matter is over. If they present articles of impeachment, it comes to the United States Senate. There is no discretion here. Under our rules, the president, the majority leader, must present that to the full Senate for a trial. Now, how the trial is conducted, there's a lot of discretion.
Presided over by the Chief Justice
of the Supreme Court. But how the trial itself will take place will be decided by the majority of the members of the United States Senate, as that the procedures for how that trial takes place. To have a conviction and removal from office requires a 2/3 vote. So I am really a juror, and I just urge all of my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, don't prejudge this and put country over party. This is a very serious issue. It should not be based upon politics. It should be based upon whether these charges, if presented, are serious enough to remove a president from office. And that's where I think we have to really back up and take politics out of this. How this will play politically, people can argue, but that can't be part of our consideration.
Well, it's interesting, Senator. I think when we talk about the history of impeachment in the United States, many folks to this day think that Richard Nixon was impeached, when in fact he wasn't impeached. He resigned because Senator Barry Goldwater and other Republican leaders went to him and said, this is not going to end well. So at some point, I guess, and you say don't prejudge it, there's going to have to be some shift in sentiment of Republican voters as well as Republican senators, right, to take a different approach than they've taken so far.
Well, other than Fox News, I don't know what the basis is for the belief system when there's an admission, and and Don's been carting this around all week, and with yellow type, when you've admitted to doing this, then to say, well, it's okay that we did it. I think the reason we send you to Washington is to make sure that if stuff like this happens, that this is intolerable across. But where is transparency in a presidential phone call? Every time Ronald Reagan talked to someone, every word of it is there. Is there anything such as an off-the-record meeting between leaders? I'm wondering what happens in these phone calls.
Well, first of all, I've been pretty clear since Donald Trump was elected as president and the actions as he's taken after that I believe he's abused power. I've been pretty clear about that. I've also have read the transcript and been pretty clear that you cannot use your office to seek help from a foreign leader in a presidential campaign. The question, though, is does this rise to the level of an impeachable offense? That's going to be up to the House of Representatives. That's not up for me to make a decision. The members of the House are charged with that. And if articles of impeachment are brought, it's up to me to judge whether they have proven the case and whether that, in fact, warrants removal from office. That's a different standard than what you're asking me about the president's conduct. I disagree with the president's conduct, but I need to keep my objectivity as it relates to the constitutional responsibilities of impeachment.
Well, if he did this, then you have to say, is this okay? Are we going to allow this or not?
It's the sole decision of the United States Senate as to whether the articles of impeachment have been established and whether they warrant conviction. That's in the sole discretion of the United States Senate, and there is no appeal from the decision of the United States Senate.
Well,
we make the law here.
Peel the
Fair enough.
Peel the curtain back for us, if you can, Senator, a little bit, because I think listeners and voters try to get a sense of what it's really like on Capitol Hill right now. I mean, you get reporters and others who will allude to the fact that privately Republican lawmakers are frustrated, but that they're not willing to come out and take a stand. They read polls. They know how popular the president is among
Republican voters.
Republican
Well, no one can be Goldwater, right? No one can go up to this president and say
at this point. So my question is, when you have I don't want you to out anyone, but when you have private conversations with those across the aisle, describe their mindset right now. Where are they?
Well, first of all, we talked already about the partisanship and how we really have become too partisan. There's no question about it. But the personal relationships in the United States Senate between Democrats and Republicans is pretty strong. I have many Republican members of the Senate that are personal friends. We talk frequently. We are engaged outside of the United States Senate. Our families know each other. We attend family events together. We work on issues regularly together. Many bills that are now the law of the land or on their way to become the law of the land or legislation that I worked with a Republican member of the Senate got done. And I can name you numerous examples of this, from domestic issues like the Chesapeake Bay and transportation to international issues such as the Magnitsky Human Rights Bill and actions that we've done in different parts of the world. So that's the positive side of this. I think it's fair to say that a large number of Republican senators disagree strongly with President Trump. They do not voice that to me the way that I would like to see them do it. And they certainly don't act when we have a chance in the United States Senate to counter some of the things that President Trump has done. They have not put their votes there. Some have. We've had what's known as the Congressional Review Act on the abuse of his powers that I've already mentioned, like the transfer of funds from military construction projects like a child development center at Joint Base Andrews and using that to build his wall, which to me is unconstitutional. We've had several Republicans who have joined us in those votes, but we don't have enough. And there are many members who believe what the president is doing is wrong, or not expressing themselves, or not acting the way I think they should. Now, you could argue they're doing that for their political survival because in their state, Donald Trump is very popular. To me, that's not justification. To me, on fundamental issues, you've got to put the country over your party. You have to. I've had many votes through my career that I was told could very well jeopardize my career, but they're fundamental votes. Sending our men and women into harm's way, the Iraq War. At the time, I was told that was a very unpopular vote, and that it could cause a primary challenge, and I could lose my seat. But that's a fundamental issue. You've got to stand up for what you believe in. That's why you're there. You're not there to get reelected. You're there to serve, and before you know it, your term's going to be up. So I am not at all going to condone the conduct of Republicans who disagree with President Trump in their failure to stand up and be counted.
The Vice President Biden has said as part of his campaign for the presidency that one term of Donald Trump will be an aberration. That's Siri telling me about Donald Trump. They got to turn Siri off. That
please turn Donald Trump off.
One term of Donald Trump will be an aberration. That 2 terms will alter the arc of our democracy for decades. Do you concur with the Vice President on that view?
I think American values have been very much negatively impacted by Donald Trump. Our strength as a nation is what we believe in, that we believe diversity is a strength, that we believe every American should have equal opportunity to succeed in our society, that we are a compassionate nation. We believe we open borders to those who are persecuted in other countries. That's been American values since the birth of our nation. And yes, we've struggled over the years to really live up to those ideals, but we've always made progress. This president, when he said in Charlottesville that those that are there to protest the white supremacists, there's some equality to the white supremacists themselves, that trampled on our values, and he never backtracked from those statements.
Well, they actually will have you believe he didn't really say it.
Right, I understand that. And then what he's done on our border, what he's done in regards to pulling away from international agreements such as climate change, and the working with our allies where he's embraced those who are autocratic leaders who have done terrible things. All that hurts American values. Our leadership globally, which is so important for democracy around the world, has been very much compromised by Donald Trump. So I think we're going to pay a heavy price on American values and American global leadership on the 4 years of President Trump's presidency, or as long as he's president of the United States. I don't want to speculate beyond this term. Obviously, we have national elections coming up. The Democrats have a very active primary season going on.
You don't have a horse in the race yet?
I have 20-some horses in the race.
A lot of your colleagues.
I got 6 of my colleagues that are still in the race. So, yes, no question about it.
By the way, some thoughts of Senator Sanders, too, right?
Right, and of course, we're recording this is the day after he went through his heart procedure on stents being put in. I know Bernie Sanders very well. I know he's a fighter. I know he's a very energetic guy. He's indicated he's going to be at full strength. I hope that's the case.
Mick Jagger came back a couple weeks ago from it. So if Mick can come back, I think Bernie can come back too. Senator Ben Cardin joining us here on Baltimore Positive today. Back to Baltimore and how Baltimore factors into this when Elijah Cummings and my town, our city, our citizens, everyone here, gets potshot from the President of the United States in a way that's not only unfair, unjust, sneaking in and out of President Street a couple weeks ago, I saw that, but Baltimore's role in rising back up and a part of this as to who's sitting in that seat and how it affects our city.
Well, first of all, I love Baltimore City. We talked earlier about my involvement and getting involved in politics. I'm a product of the Baltimore City public school system. I thank my teachers and the school system for the base I have to be able to succeed in life. Proud graduate, Liberty School number 64 at Garrison. So, I go back, our roots go back here a long time. This city's history is incredible, and I think its future is very, very bright. Understand we have real challenges. All urban centers have real challenges. There's no question. Poverty exists in Baltimore. Baltimore is a relatively small geography to deal with the major problems. It is the economic heart of our state, and it's the cultural center, and it's where people want to be. So, and I tell you, it's exciting as I go through Baltimore to see those cranes and buildings being built and so many people now moving into downtown Baltimore. It's an exciting place, but we have to invest in the neighborhoods. The housing stock needs to be much better than it is today. We must invest in our schools. The Kerwin Commission report to me is vital for Baltimore City and Maryland and our country's future to invest in education. And we need to do that, and Baltimore needs that help.
Are you frustrated? Kerwin is a passion.
Well, I mean, we've had Hornbeck, Grasman. We've just gone down the list.
They've all been talking. Yeah. We have Bill Ferguson coming on in a couple weeks. They're all passionate about Kerwin. Are you frustrated at the reports that the governor is looking to infuse a lot of dark money into a campaign to defeat Kerwin? Because folks like you talk about, David Hornbeck will say that if we miss, it's decades lost, that it will have decades of impact.
I wonder what is the other argument other than it might cost money? Well, it might be worth it.
I think Kerwin is vital for our future. I want the governor to support it. I want the president to support Kerwin. I think the federal government has a role to play here. So it's not just saying the state. When you take a look at principal responsibility, the principal responsibility to run a school system rests with Baltimore City, rests with the local government. The principal responsibility to make sure that there are tools available for excellence is the state of Maryland. They have the principal responsibility on equal opportunity for all students in Baltimore. When you look at special needs, it's the federal government. We should be fully funding what's known as IDA, the program which deals with children with special needs. We should be doing a better job to make sure that modern schools are available to all students in this country through school construction help by lower interest rates. There are things that we can do at the national level that can help make Kerwin a reality. But yes, it's key that the federal government steps up, and it's key that the 24 jurisdictions step up. And yes, it means that we're going to be putting more money into the system, but I would do anything for my children. Wouldn't we do anything for our children? So why wouldn't we invest?
I don't think there's anybody in this country that thinks that the education system in our country couldn't be better. That we would have a better society if we made it better. And we send all you to Washington, we send people to Annapolis, and we say, make it better, but don't do this, don't raise our taxes. We don't want potholes, but we don't want to pay to fix them. At some point, when I do travel, and I know you've had so much of foreign relations and you've been around the world, when you see other places and you get off the plane and I'm going to Asia in a couple of weeks, I'm going to Europe early next year, you see places and you say, what did they do for their children? When I'm in New York and I get on a subway and I see the sophistication of a subway that was built 100 years ago and think, man, some politician really laid out for this, because this didn't get built during his term. This was something you talked about for in your case, grandchildren, and say, because I'm not going to be here to see the third wing of this or that, but to invest in it, it takes courage. It really does take courage.
Well, first, you're right. But let me make a couple points here. A budget speaks to priorities. And that's probably the most important decision made by government, is how they allocate the resources that they have under their control.
That's what you really think, right? That's the evidence.
Yes. So you got to make the priorities. What is the most important? Where are your highest priorities? To me, children need to be our highest priority. So it's easy to say that they should get the first attention of a budget. Yes, we have to be careful how we spend other people's money. And when we're in a position of authority where we're given the trust and we have taxes that we've collected, we've got to treat that as trust funds. And we have to be very careful every dollar we spend. And we can do a better job spending those dollars. So taxpayers have legitimate concerns to make sure they're not overtaxed. I agree with that. So, but we've got to set priorities. We've got to make sure there's accountability, including how education dollars are spent. There needs to be accountability, and Kerwin talks about accountability, making sure that students who graduate high school are at a college level if they're going to college, and are ready for trade school if they're going to trade. So they don't need remedial in order to go to the next step. But it starts with making sure that fourth graders can read at a level where they can comprehend their reading so that they can learn.
Right.
So it is that degree of accountability must be built into the system. And then, yes, we should have the courage to say that this is reasonable to expect from government, and therefore we should impose the taxes necessary to fund those reasonable expenses in a fair manner. And at the national level, that means a progressive tax structure. At the local levels, it means you need help from other jurisdictions in order to be able to fund the needs that you have for your citizens of Baltimore.
Do you have a hard time in D.C. for people who aren't in cities, senators that serve in places without Baltimore's and without Detroit's, to really understand how important these economic centers are? When I always say to Don, only 15% of our population has a passport. They don't know anything about any country you would mention around the world because they haven't experienced it. There's some experiential part of this where cities do have unique challenges you might not be aware of if you're not from a place that has these challenges.
It's interesting. I think when I served in the House of Representatives, clearly there was a challenge for members who represented rural communities understanding the challenges in urban centers. In the United States Senate, it's a little bit differently because we represent states. Most states have some urban centers in their states, so you get more sensitivity in the Senate towards the urban issues than, quite frankly, you do in the House of Representatives. Everything else being equal. I mean, today, of course, the House is controlled by Democrats, the Senate by Republicans, so that obviously brings about a difference in attitude between the two bodies. There is a greater attention by the Democrats on urban needs and willing to invest more funds than there is on the Republican side. I would also argue that there's a greater degree of accountability on the Democratic side. They recognize that we've got to have accountability in the way we spend money.
Nestor, it's not hard to see why the last election that the senator lost was somewhere back in the 8th or 9th grade. We're going to come back, talk about the important legislative issues, guns, health care, infrastructure, immigration, all those things that the senator is fighting for when we come back.
We're at Baltimore Positive. We are at State Fair, about to get chicken and waffles, I swear. One more segment.
Man loves his chicken and waffles.
Back for more Catonsville right after this.